The first Suzuki movie that I saw was Tokyo Drifter. I think every image you see from it, every still, the cover of every release just has this like poppy graphic quality that, at least when I was like 16 or 17 or however old I was when I first saw it, caught my eye in a way that the other ones didn't. So that was my introduction, and it's a good place to start because it sort of encapsulates so much of what makes Suzuki so fun. Tokyo Drifter and Branded to Kill were sort of like the pinnacle of his fantorgasmic 60s Yakuza movies. What's kind of fascinating about Suzuki, or what's maybe important to know, is that the sort of exuberance, the visual exuberance of his movies is a reaction to restriction. He was a B-movie director for Nikatsu, who were known at that time for their Yakuza movies, and he had no time and no money. And literally, like, these films were turned around in like 5 or 6 weeks. He had to make 3 or 4 of them a year, handed these terrible potboiler garbage scripts, which you can tell when you're watching the movie he has no interest in, right? Like, you don't watch these movies for the plot. You could watch these movies without subtitles. You probably should watch the movies without subtitles. You don't get anything from the dialogue. You don't get anything from the story. They're really just templates for him to experiment. And I think because he was so bored in a way by the movies he was making, and I think kind of contemptuous of the movies he was making, he just played. And there was no consequences because he was making 4 of them a year. You know, it wasn't like, oh, if I don't do it right now, I'm not gonna get to make a movie for 5 more years. So it's just pure experimentation and play and fun and a sort of visual joy that has nothing to do with psychology or character development or plot development. It's just, wouldn't it be fun if the climax of this movie looked like a MGM musical? Why does that have anything to do with the movie or this character or this hitman? It doesn't, nothing. There's nothing to do with it. Also, these movies, Tokyo Drifter is a great example. These movies are commercial products. I mean, all movies are commercial products. But it's literally like a lot of these Nikatsu movies, the B movies, were made to sell pop songs. There's a pop song, this unbelievably annoying earworm that goes throughout Tokyo Drifter that's the reason why the movie was made. I mean, the lead in the movie, Tetsuya Watari, was a pop singer. I mean, he can barely act. It's really like an advertisement, right? So within this tight little box he's working in, there's total freedom. The movies make no sense, you know. Not only do they not make sense in a narrative way, but the normal sort of visual logic that we expect from movies isn't there. Especially in action sequences. I mean, there's almost no sense of geographic continuity. And in a way, it's sort of like, I think there's a pretty direct line between Seijun Suzuki's Yakuza movies and like John Wick. You know, and not because, I don't know, maybe they were inspired, maybe John Wick was inspired by these movies, but at the very least, John Wick was inspired by John Woo's movies, you know, and John Woo's movies couldn't exist without Seijun Suzuki's movies, but it's the same sort of like emphasis on the abstract poetry of movement and violence over physics or the real world or motivation or any, you know, and that merged with 60s psychedelia, and it reaches a real crazy peak in Suzuki. But also a lot of American filmmakers in the generation after him, or even 2 generations after him, were directly inspired by Suzuki. You know, people like Jim Jarmusch and Tarantino, you know, and it's this sort of subversion of the action film, subversion of the gangster film, and this sort of carefree willingness to pull from everywhere, you know, to pastiche and swallow everything and not to have to explain any of it. If you see the patchwork, manic quality of a Tarantino movie, I mean, it's exactly the patchwork, manic quality of a Suzuki movie. But somehow out of that patchwork, out of that Frankenstein, comes something that feels very singular. The movies that I want to make and that I have made could not be less like the movies that Suzuki makes. But I think what's inspiring about his movies for me is like on a deeper level, which is this feeling of freedom, you know, that he's not thinking of movies in a mathematical way, in a structural way, in a schematic way. He's just reacting to his own curiosity, his own proclivities on any given day or week. And that ability to trust how you see the world, what you're interested in, what sort of images appeal to you on a subconscious level, and not to have to fucking question everything all the time and fit it into a box that's been handed to you. I think that's really inspiring.